I said I wasn't going to record this video until I was pregnant again. I am pregnant again and I'm safely in my third trimester at the time that I'm recording this. The story and the baby that I'm talking about in this video was my very first baby, the first time I ever got pregnant. And the reason why I wanted to wait to share this story until I conceived again is because this is just super painful to talk about, but I know for myself, watching videos of other women sharing their stories gave me so much hope and also just made me feel less alone when I was going through my miscarriage. Again, this is not the baby that I'm currently pregnant with. This was my first ever child, first ever pregnancy. Also, I just want to say that I have prayed for those who are currently going through a miscarriage and or have gone through a miscarriage who may be watching this video. Know that I am praying for you. I have prayed for you before I made this video. This is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Truthfully, it is one of the hardest things to experience and the most painful. Now, let me explain my story. So hi, just to begin, I am Trinell. I got pregnant for the first time ever on September 28th, 2022. This pregnancy was unexpected, but pleasantly anticipated. We did not plan to conceive. We didn't plan to get pregnant. We were not trying. But when we got the news, when I tested positive, it was the best news ever. We were so excited, so happy. And just a little context, if you're following my channel from way back when, or even now, if you check back on my channel, we actually went to Huntsville, Alabama, which is where my husband grew up. So we were there. I vlogged our trip there. That was 2 weeks before I tested positive. So I'll just say that we probably conceived during that trip. Okay, so back to the story. So September 28th, 2022, we tested positive for pregnancy for the very first time ever. Again, as I mentioned, we were super excited. That's my first time ever taking a pregnancy test, ever thinking that I was pregnant for real, for real. It was just such a super exciting time for the both of us. And my husband, he desired to be a father even before I met him and we dated. That was one of the first things that he spoke about and one of the things that I considered a positive sign to confirm that he was the one for me, because a lot of men are either not enthusiastic about being a father slash parent and or want it to happen, but they're in no rush. But my husband was very eager. So he was super excited with the news. I was chilling, honestly. You spoke to me in August that same year. I was adamantly saying like, in no rush. But looking back now, I probably would have been trying to conceive on my honeymoon. I'll talk and explain why I feel that way now a little bit later again. Okay, so we tested positive the end of September. After testing positive, we shared the news with my mom. She's one of the first people that we told, and she was also super excited. I am the last child and only daughter amongst my immediate siblings. There's 5 of us. So my mom was super excited to get the news. My mom is a widow now. My dad passed away in 2021, so that's why I'm only talking about her reaction. But yeah, she was super excited for the news, and so we were all excited. Our first doctor's appointment was, I want to say, around 6 weeks. You typically find out that you're pregnant around 4 weeks. So 2 weeks after that, early October, I had my first prenatal appointment. I went to a new facility, a new clinic, and I met with a midwife there, and she was not mean, but she was very like serious. Definitely not a very enthusiastic doctor by any means. That's important for later on. We went to our first appointment. Everything was looking good. We heard the baby's heartbeat. Everything looked normal. My HCG levels looked normal. HCG is a certain hormone that's detected in the blood that you start producing once you conceive. Once an egg and sperm meet and implant HCG is produced, and it continues to increase. The number or the level of HCG, the number of that hormone continues to increase until about the end of your first trimester when it kind of levels out. So one of the ways that doctors test to see if the pregnancy is going well is if it doubles every 48 hours. According to that doubling, my HCG levels looked good. Everything looked fine at 6 weeks. We were thrilled. We had our ultrasound. The picture looked beautiful. And of course, this is the first time seeing anything like that. Our first time doing an ultrasound. Our first time being at this type of facility. Like, it was the newness of it all that had us just feeling over the moon. And again, we were just super excited. So that was early October at 6 weeks. Then my dad's birthday, 10/10. That was a year after he passed, just about. He died a week before his birthday. On his actual birthday, my family and I had a dinner together. Me, my mom, my siblings, my husband, and their respective partners. We all had a dinner. On that day, at the end of the dinner, when we came back to my mom's house and we were all chatting, my husband and I decided to break the news that we were pregnant. So that again was early October. It was a few days before our 6-week appointment. So we had not yet had an ultrasound to show my family. I do remember that distinctly, but we were just so excited. So we shared it with them. One of my brothers already suspected, so it just felt right to share. And they were also very excited for us. My husband's birthday at the end of October, we decided to tell his family about our news. On his birthday, he likes to celebrate with his family, and so we had a cake reveal to celebrate with them. And my husband, I didn't know how we were going to pull it off, truth be told. Now, I know people do gender reveals with a cake, but I didn't know how we were going to say that we were pregnant through a cake. But my husband figured it out, and it went amazingly. We decided to get the baker to write "we're pregnant" on the top of the cake. And what he did is like make it a game for his family to like guess the flavor of cake. So before we opened up the box, we asked everyone to guess the flavor so that everyone could anticipate and look at the actual cake once we opened it. When we opened the box and everyone saw "we're pregnant" on top, they were also through the moon, super excited. Everyone was screaming and hugging us, and some people said that they knew. People always say they knew that you were pregnant, or you tell that you're pregnant, and maybe some people do know, but I think people just say that. It was a great reveal, the best reveal ever, truth be told. I was around 8 weeks at that point. We hadn't had a second prenatal appointment yet, but we had no reason to suspect anything would be bad or anything like that. So it felt perfect opportunity, and that's when they found out. After that reveal, the next week, I was 9 weeks along, and that was our second appointment. So we went into the same office and we saw the same midwife. When she did the transvaginal ultrasound that time, she made a face when looking at the screen and was like, "Oh, I think it's a mist." That was like her first reaction to her assistant when looking at the ultrasound and out loud in the presence of us, because obviously I'm laying there, my husband is there. And I was like thinking to myself, like, what does that mean? Because she was already a serious, straightforward person, so I couldn't tell from her reaction if it was supposed to be sad, good, bad. I couldn't gauge. All I know is she said it looked like a mist, and I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, "Everything okay? Do you hear the heartbeat?" Again, we heard it at 6 weeks. I was now supposed to be 9 weeks, and she was like, "I don't hear a heartbeat. The baby is measuring only 6 weeks, 1 day." And that was the last measurement that she got at our last appointment / the first appointment that we had. The baby measured 6 weeks, 1 day based on her calculations, and so in theory the baby did not grow from that last appointment. I was like, "Wait, what? You don't hear a heartbeat? What do you mean?" And she was like, "It seems like a miscarriage or silent miscarriage." She kind of was telling me but also telling her staff at the same time, so she didn't quite explain what that was besides saying measuring behind and she can't find a heartbeat. She was just like, "It's okay, we'll get a second opinion to just make sure." And I was just like, "Make sure what? What are you talking about?" I didn't understand the seriousness of not finding a heartbeat during one appointment. Like, I just did not understand. And she didn't explain, which honestly was problematic. But again, it was all very new to us. While I was waiting for my ultrasound appointment at another facility, that would be a second opinion to confirm that it actually was what what this midwife actually said it was, I did my own research. I looked up silent miscarriage. I looked up miscarriage. And in case you all are not familiar with those terms as I was when I heard it, basically a silent miscarriage or miscarriage, both are used interchangeably. They mean the same thing. That is when the baby was once alive. So at one point early in the pregnancy, a heartbeat was detected, but somewhere along the way, the baby's growth starts slowing down. Eventually the heart stops beating, and eventually the baby dies within the mother with no physical outward signs that a miscarriage is happening. That's why it's called silent or missed, because unlike what is typically known as a miscarriage, I'll just call it a regular miscarriage to draw the distinction here, but typically call it a miscarriage when the mother feels cramping and has bleeding, it's painful. Those are typical miscarriage symptoms where women can feel that something's not right. Miscarriage, you feel nothing. It literally is as if all is well. The only way you find out that something isn't right is when you go to a doctor, they do ultrasound, they find out the baby is measuring behind, and most importantly, that the baby has no heartbeat anymore. That is like the way that they determine that it's missed. So yeah, you'll still have pregnancy symptoms. Well, honestly, you might notice that you've declined your pregnancy symptoms and you didn't even notice. And for me, that was the case. In hindsight, I realized that the initial symptoms that I found, I no longer felt them after 6 weeks because I documented a few on my phone, and I didn't even have that many, but I did notice I stopped documenting them after 6 weeks. I just thought maybe I was living life and forgot, but could also be that I no longer felt symptoms. That's also an indication, but again, you might not notice that until you get this news and then look back, which is what I did and noticed. Fast forward to a week later, this is 10 weeks at this point. I was supposed to be 10 weeks along. I did the second ultrasound at a new facility, and that doctor and the nurse who did it or sonographer who did it were absolutely wonderful, super compassionate. They did the ultrasound. They said that it's accurate. We can't find a heartbeat. They're so sorry. They kept apologizing. They explained what it was. They explained so many things. It was still earth-shattering because I never thought that I would ever have a miscarriage. Who actually ever thinks that they're gonna have a miscarriage? I don't know who actually thinks so. But for me, I have no history of miscarriage in my family. I just never thought. I'm young. At that time, I was 28 years old. I was young. It was my first ever time being pregnant. So again, it's not like I've been pregnant before and, you know, terminated those pregnancies or anything like that. Never taken birth control hormonally through a pill. I eat healthy. I typically exercise. Like, there's so many things I just never thought. Truth is, it just happens to some women. 1 in 5 women, I believe the statistic is, have or experience a miscarriage at some point in their life. 1 in 5. That's crazy high odds. 20% of women experience a miscarriage. That's a high percentage in my opinion. So I just never thought that I would be among them. I also didn't know that statistic prior to going through the experience. This is all research that I've done after the fact. At the ultrasound appointment, the doctor explained that I had 3 options. I believe the midwife might have mentioned these as well, but I was not really trying to listen to her. It was just all a blur anyway. But the doctor at the second ultrasound, he explained I had 3 options. He said that I could let a baby pass naturally, and that can take weeks to months. And he said the danger in waiting it out is that you can get an infection that could be life-threatening if you essentially leave a dead fetus within you for too long, and you know, it decays. Also, the problem with that is with a miscarriage, the baby technically was dead for X amount of weeks between when it last measured to what you were supposed to be. So at this point, I was 10 weeks. That's 4 weeks. It was a whole month of the baby allegedly or supposedly no longer being alive, and my body still didn't process, it didn't register that the baby wasn't alive to expel it on its own. So he was just like, yeah, you could do that, but he doesn't recommend for all those reasons. The second option that he gave me was to take a pill. I don't remember the name of the pill now. If I do, maybe I'll put it on the screen, but it's a certain pill that you take that helps you to have a full miscarriage. It makes everything come out. It's the traditional symptoms of heavy cramping, heavy bleeding, and eventually the fetus comes out. He did mention that some women say that it's very painful. And upon my research, I found a lot of women saying it was horrible. A lot of women also saying it was worse than actual labor. Again, I'm not sure if any of that's true, but a lot of women were like, don't do it. In his defense, the doctor did mention, in addition to it being painful, or some women thinking it's painful, he said that it sometimes happens that even with taking the medication, that not everything passes. And therefore, some women who take the medication still have to do a D&C, which is the third option, and ultimately the option that I decided to go with. So D&C, he explained, is a procedure where they essentially use some type of a tool that they use to basically scrape out or vacuum out the fetus inside the uterus. It's a quick procedure. You're in and out same day and you're put to sleep so you don't feel a thing. And that procedure is a lot more thorough because they get the camera to see if there are any other tissue that is still remaining in the uterus that has not come out completely. They can get it out because they can see and do everything one time. My understanding and what he explained as the cons to that is that it is a medical procedure. It's a surgery. If you're afraid of surgeries, just know that that is what it is, that it may take some time to recover because it is a surgery. And I think that was the only cons that I recall hearing. And at that time, I had never done any type of surgery, had never been admitted to the hospital. The idea of a surgery was a little daunting, but out of all the options given, once I left the facility and I did my own research, D&C, the one that I felt was the best scenario, the best option for me personally. I'll say too that there was someone close to me who had a miscarriage prior to me, and she was a good resource. I spoke to her about what she decided to do and why. And she also did a D&C, and pros, she mentioned it was a quick recovery, and also that you're able to get genetic testing done on yourself and the baby to see if there was anything genetically abnormal about the baby that could have explained the miscarriage. This is super important because that is one of the top causes of miscarriage, is genetic or chromosomal abnormality. I just wanted to know if that was the cause. You also know the gender of your baby, which I also wanted to know. There is an option to actually get the fetus, to get it cremated, or to simply bury it. I did not decide to do that, but could. That is an option once you do the D&C. That same week that I got the second ultrasound and I was told my options, I did a lot of research and ultimately decided to do the D&C. I also watched a lot of videos too to know what the experience would be like, videos like this, and again, I felt most comfortable going the D&C route. My D&C was scheduled that same week. I'm so thankful that it was, and the reason why it was because it's difficult to schedule D&Cs because I believe it's called an elective surgery, which means like it's not needed. Like the urgency of it is not needed. You have other options. But I was fit in just a few days of me learning about my miscarriage because I had a wedding to go to that Friday. So let's say I had the ultrasound to confirm the baby was sleeping on Monday. On Wednesday, my D&C was scheduled and I was leaving on Friday to go to a wedding out of town on a plane. That kind of expedited the doctor's scheduling of the D&C because he was just like, if you go on a plane, anything can happen. You can be bleeding out profusely if you let this naturally happen based on the altitudes of the plane. Taking the pill is going to be horrible if you decide to do that while you're away or after. It's just not a good time. And he was just like, just be on the safe side. Let's get it in before you leave. And I was so thankful. Wednesday came, I had my appointment early. I was there in the hospital. I got checked in. The wait wasn't even too long. I believe I had to fast. They hooked me up to IV. It was all so surreal because again, this is my first time ever doing a surgery, but the hospital took great care of me, and honestly it's the hospital I'm gonna deliver this baby at. I was taken care of. Like everyone kept checking on me, asked me if I was okay. When I got into the operating room, it was super quick. They laid me down, told me like it's gonna be a quick procedure. They put what they said was oxygen over my face. It was not oxygen, it was anesthesia. They told me it was oxygen and they told me to breathe normally and they told me to count down from 10. By 3, I was gone. And then I woke up in a whole nother room, which I now know is a recovery room. It felt like only 1 second had passed. Truthfully, it felt like no time has passed. I remember waking up thinking to myself, this is crazy. I literally just fell asleep, and now it's over with. I want to say it took 45 minutes. It felt like no time. When I got up, I was not in any physical pain. I did have a pad under me, but other than that, I didn't feel any cramping, burning, nothing. The worst pain that I felt is that they put some type of medicine in my IV that I believe was supposed to help with infection, and that kind of burned when it went in my veins. Other than that, I felt fine. I was just kind of laying there. They gave me some crackers and juice and a cookie to eat, which I did because I was hungry, and I waited for my husband to come around with the car to pick me up. You have to be picked up after a procedure like this because you're under anesthesia. We knew this. My husband was there waiting anyway. After my medicine was done, because your medicine has to be done, I stayed laying there in the recovery room for maybe an hour, hour and a half until that happened. They wait until you feel comfortable walking around and until you stop bleeding as heavy, and for me, I wasn't bleeding that much after, and so I was out. Of course, I was sad emotionally. I was not in the best place after that. I kept thinking, like, why me? Why did this happen to me? What happened? We were just so happy and it didn't make sense. And then like I felt horrible because we had just told Michael's family, and then the next week we found out we were having this miscarriage. So it was just like, man, if I would have waited to tell them, I wouldn't have to go back and tell them bad news. My husband and I would have been bringing the first grandchild / niece or nephew to his parents and siblings, so it just meant so much to that family I know to hear about our news. My family, because recently a family member of our family did go through a miscarriage, a partner of a family member. I just want to make that clear just in case anyone was like, oh, I thought it didn't run in your family. It doesn't. A partner of a family member went through a miscarriage. Recently, we were kind of aware about the fact that like it could happen. We always knew it could happen, but it was fresh in our minds. So it wasn't as difficult and I wasn't as scared to explain what happened to my family. I stayed at our apartment just bumping gospel. One of the songs that truly encouraged me was Bigger by J.J. Hairston. I still listen to that song now, and it was all about God's gonna do bigger and better than you can imagine. No matter what you're going through, he has bigger in store for you. That's essentially the premise of the song, and that's what I was claiming. Yeah, this is a sad season of my life. Yeah, we had joy but for a moment, but like God's gonna give me bigger and better. I didn't know what that was, but I claimed it, and those gospel songs encouraged me, and I listened to lots of women on YouTube talk about their stories, and they explained what they went through, and some of them even said that they conceived shortly after miscarriage, and that was the hope that I claimed. Like that's the hope that I wanted. I was like, yay, I'm gonna try as soon as I stop bleeding. That's another thing my doctor told me that I could try as soon as I stopped bleeding, so that's what I intended to do. Like I was like, babe, once you know, no more blood, it's on and popping. And I didn't bleed for more than a week after the procedure, and it was fairly light. And so we were on top of it. And at that point, I was actually trying to conceive. To try to conceive, in my opinion, means testing your ovulation to know exactly when your egg drops or around the time that it drops. Only about 6 days within a woman's menstrual cycle that they could actually conceive when they're actually fertile. Knowing when that period is, testing ovulation to know exactly within that period when the egg is going to drop or within 12 hours of when it drops, and like doing what you got to do in that window. That could be taking your prenatals, which I wasn't taking prenatals prior to getting pregnant the first time because wasn't trying to get pregnant, eating right, not drinking, smoking, which I was never a big drinker, definitely never smoked. So all those things weren't new. And your partner doing the same in terms of lifestyle and diet. We started actually trying after the miscarriage because I was like, women have been conceiving after. It's gonna be me. I claim it, Lord. And I did claim it. We did try. That advice from my doctor is not the advice that every doctor gives women. I've heard people say wait 3 months or wait a month or wait a period. Listen to your doctor. If you're going through this, listen to your doctor and what they recommend. My doctor said, as soon as I stop bleeding, I'm in the clear, and that's the advice that I took. In hindsight, I would have waited for some time just for my body to regulate, and that's just because, as I claimed, I did conceive again right after my miscarriage. I had a period in December, my one and only period after the DNC, and then January I got pregnant, and then I had a chemical pregnancy, which I'll talk about what that is, and then February I got pregnant, and I also had a chemical pregnancy. This is January and February 2023 for context. And looking back, I would say the chemical pregnancy was because my body wasn't ready. I don't know if that's the reason, but I think that was the reason. My body was not ready to have a child. It needed to recalibrate. It needed to relax. I don't know the actual medical term, but I really think that it needed to take a break before actually being pregnant again. And I just really wanted to be pregnant. I really wanted to be a mother. I really wanted that reality back. And I wanted to recover as much time as possible. When you start having the idea of being a mother in your head and you think about like, oh man, 9 months, like it's a long time. You kind of feel like, all right, let's not waste any more time. Let's start it now so that I have less than 9 months to get my bundle of joy again. A chemical pregnancy is when the egg and the sperm fertilize, but either fails to implant or does not implant properly. There are also different reasons for why this happens. I believe the number one is chromosomal issues. Sometimes it's just literally random, which I think was our case. In a case of a chemical pregnancy, what typically happens is that you test positive because the sperm and the egg meet, they fertilize, and they kind of start implanting. As I mentioned earlier, you start producing HCG, which is what is detected on a urine pregnancy test around 4 weeks. You get a rise in HCG at some point early in the pregnancy, but then eventually the line gets lighter, your HCG levels are not progressing as they should / declining, and then you eventually bleed like a normal period or slightly heavier than a normal period. For me, my periods are not bad, so slightly heavier for me than a normal period. I had never gone through a chemical pregnancy before, so I didn't even know what it was. Honestly, a lot of women go through it but don't even know they're having a chemical pregnancy because you really have to test that you're pregnant early for you to even detect that you were pregnant. Because I was actively trying to conceive, I was testing as soon as possible to know if we did. But for, let's say, a normal woman who wasn't trying to conceive, they might just think their period just came late, because that's essentially what it feels like. That's what happened until early September of 2023, a few months later, when we conceived this baby that I'm currently pregnant with now. Bigger and better did come, and I say better because this pregnancy has been absolutely wonderful. I have had 0 symptoms. I feel amazing. It's just been a joy to carry this pregnancy. I'm so excited that God blessed me so soon, because again, I've heard of women conceiving right after going through a miscarriage, and I've heard of women taking them years to conceive as well. So I just feel just so grateful that it didn't take us long to conceive again and have a healthy baby. I didn't mention this before, but we did do the genetic testing on our first baby, and we found out that it was a boy and that he was perfectly normal. There's no reason found, according to genetics, for why I did go through a silent miscarriage. Sometimes you'll never know. That's kind of something you have to make peace with, and I have made peace with. I just feel like it wasn't the right time for us for whatever reason. It's not for me to try to understand. Let me know, guys, if you want to see the videos of me finding out that I'm pregnant for the first time and surprising my husband about the pregnancy. This is my first baby, the one that I told the story about. I did not record my reaction to this current pregnancy just because once you try to conceive, you kind of test yourself every month hoping that you would conceive, and it just ends up not being as special in my opinion because you end up getting a lot of negatives. So I didn't necessarily record my reactions or his reactions or do anything elaborate to surprise people then, but I did my first pregnancy. So let me know if it's not weird to share that, or let me know if you want to see that. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to follow me on this pregnancy journey, and I will see you in my next video.